This is John Henry Westen for LifeSiteNews, bringing you breaking news about the FBI raid on that pro-life Catholic family with 7 children. In the morning, the wee morning hours, 7 a.m. on Friday, 30 or so FBI agents showed up at their house, guns drawn, smashing on the door. And this is what we got exclusively from Ryan Marie, the mom, to our reporter, Patrick Delaney. If you go to LifeSiteNews.com, you will see the original coverage, which has now been quoted by Fox News and every major league news station out there, because this was breaking news all over the weekend. Here at LifeSite News' John Henry Westen show, we have the first interview with the family spokesman, Brian Middleton. But before we go there, a couple things. Here is what Ryan Marie told LifeSite's reporter Patrick Delaney on Friday, the day of the attack by the FBI. Get this. She said before opening the door, her husband tried to calm the FBI agents. They're banging on the door at 7 a.m. The little kids are all there on the open staircase, so they're staring at the door. She's coming down the stairs, and he says to them through the door, "Please, I'm going to open the door, but please, my children are in the home. I have 7 babies in the house." And they just keep banging on the door and screaming. And then when he opened the door, and this is Ryan Marie, the mom, explaining to Patrick Delaney at LifeSite News. Please go there to check out the full story. She explains when they opened the door, they had big, huge rifles pointed at Mark and pointed at me and kind of pointed throughout the house. And when they came in, they ordered the kids to stay upstairs. And the kids were all just screaming. It was all just very scary and traumatic. And she, of course, asked for a warrant. They said, "We're going to take him if we have a warrant or not." When she insisted, they did say that they were going to go get one. He asked for a sweater and some rosaries. When she came back with it, they had already taken him away. It's unbelievable stuff. It's an attack on freedom. We already saw the FBI raid not only Trump's home, but pro-life activists as well. This is the John Henry Westen Show, and this is the first interview with the official family spokesman, Brian Middleton. Stay tuned. Before we begin on this blockbuster story, let me tell you to please consider making a generous gift to LifeSiteNews.com. We are getting out the news like never before. We were the first news agency to jump on this story. The exclusive interview with Ryan Marie, the Houck mother who was confronting the FBI agents who took her husband away in front of her 7 little kids. Absolutely traumatic stuff. Please consider making a gift right now at give.lifesitenews.com. Thank you. Brian Middleton, thanks for being on the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, John. It's a pleasure.
Let's begin as we always do at the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. So, Brian, things for the Houck family are crazy right now. The first thing I think everybody wants to know is, how are they doing?
They're traumatized. It's obvious that what took place, regardless of whether they were SWAT team members or not SWAT team members, a large group of FBI agents showed at their house at 7 o'clock on Friday morning, armed and with shields and typical gear that you would expect, and banged on the door and seized the father of that family under gunpoint in front of the children. So their focus right now is trying to minister to their children who continue to have stress related to that unbelievable and unnecessary event.
Unbelievable. I mean, one of the things that Ryan Marie, the mom in the situation, was so gracious to speak to LifeSite's Patrick Delaney, provide us some details. She was going to get a sweater and some rosaries for him, and he was already taken by the time she came back. The children screaming at this horrific thing, 7 o'clock in the morning, guns pointed everywhere in the house, 30 or so officers. It's an unreal situation. But where they are right now, what happened to Mark? Where is he right now? How are things that way?
obviously what took place, he was released Friday afternoon at a very difficult time to find any kind of professional counsel. In the world that we live in, we don't have criminal defense attorneys, at our fingertips. The thought of having them is kind of odd. So trying to put a team of experts together over the weekend has been the task that we've all been involved with. The small team. He's comes from a wonderful family. They've gathered around him. Mark and Ryan are just incredible people, and to think that this could happen in our community is a difficult thing for all of us to process. Frankly, the excessive use of force to a man who had already told them that when they wanted him to come in, he would come in is certainly leaves you questioning, what the motivation was and what the presuppositions that went into this by the people who executed on this.
It's unbelievable, but the Biden FBI has acted like a Gestapo force for quite a while now. We saw it already with the arrest of Joan Andrews Bell, similarly with massive FBI presence. We saw the same of other pro-life activists associated with her. When that went down, we then saw it at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump. So you can't escape this, even if you're the former president. It's unreal what's going on.
The reality is that we've reached a point in our time where we have to stop pretending that we don't know what it is that we know. The unthinkable has arrived at our doorsteps, and we better begin to think the unthinkable. For years, I would see something that was evil and I would try to rationalize it, or I would see something that was irrational and I would try to rationalize it. Well, you can't do that. Like, you can infer motivation when you see action, right? So there is no logical, rational reason, no good reason for this kind of excessive use of force. So that leads you to, there must be ulterior motives, because evil always behaves, believe it or not, logically. If it looks illogical, it's because your presuppositions are false.
So let's get into this. The charge, or the accusation in question, it revolves around the Federal Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which is an act basically sort of safeguarding so-called abortuaries, which are killing children on the inside and people can't protest on the outside. But if you can get into into the specifics with us, please, of what happened.
And it's interesting that you just quoted that act, because if this act had occurred at a soccer field or in a restaurant, there would have been absolutely no consequences to it. But it happened to occur on the sacred ground of the progressive human secular left, in front of their temple of worship, impacting their sacrament. Because what took place, even if you were to accept the alleged victim's story, was a man was pushed. But what was taking place, and for those of us who have ever been to these clinics, there's always people around trying to goad the prayer warriors into some kind of an action. And this was this role of this other gentleman. That was his role, seemed to be. He's an escort, but he was also, frankly, some of these people almost appeared demonic in their language and their vile towards the prayer warriors. That's kind of an editorial on my part. The facts of the matter, as has been expressed to me because I wasn't there, is that Mark was doing his street counseling, and he was with his 12-year-old son, Mark. And this gentleman began to target young Mark, was in his face. I don't know the exact words that he was using, but it was an uncomfortable experience. Big Mark saw it happening, went over, and with strength and virility, because Mark's a strong, virile guy, he asked him to stop. The gentleman continued to lean in. Mark stepped between him. The guy just continued to lean in, and Mark pushed him away from his son. Now, look, between you and I thought Mark showed incredible restraint. Who among us, seeing our son verbally abused by a grown man, wouldn't want to do more than just push him? And that's what took place. The gentleman fell down, and there was no major injury. They've talked about undisclosed medical from, I don't know this for a fact, but what I've heard is that the medical procedure was a Band-Aid. As time goes on, Mark gave his his ID to the civil affairs officer that was there. The Philadelphia police looked at it. The district attorney looked at it. The civil affairs officer looked at it, and they said, there's really nothing here. There was then a private criminal complaint that was placed. And after the gentleman who placed it failed to arrive at the courthouse on 4 or 5 different occasions, the judge dismissed that. 6 days later, Mark received a target letter from the Fed saying that he was being targeted for this federal offense. They immediately let the USDA know that they were aware and that they were willing to come in at any point in time. And the next time anybody heard anything from the USDA was on Friday morning at 7 o'clock.
This is so unbelievable. You have to try and fathom what this is. So there's an altercation. First of all, Mark travels long ways to go and do sidewalk counseling because he's a pro-life activist, in addition to being an awesome Catholic speaker at Catholic men's conferences and everywhere else. But he prayerfully counsels people to embrace life. And he takes his 12-year-old son there, and one of these older pro-abortion escorts, they call them, is in his face saying vile and disgusting things about his dad. And he's like right up in his face. And the dad asks him to stop, and he refuses. He continues to go after his son. So he pushes him. And yeah, he falls down, whatever. So the authorities look at this. Mark Sr., that's Mark Houck, is willing to give his ID to the authorities, submit himself to whatever. They all reject it, saying there's nothing here. And then the perpetrator, well, what do you want to call it? The escort tries to bring this to a criminal court, submits it. He never even shows, and it gets thrown out. Then the Department of Justice gets to Mark to say, hey, we're going to take you up on it. No problem. He says, I'm willing to come in. They don't take him up on that. They raid his home. So this is, well, it's obvious what it is. But I want to back up for a sec to get to Mark Houck, because right now people don't know much about Mark, and they should. Take a look at this. This is a clip of Mark Houck interviewed on Guadalupe Radio Network, and he's talking about confronting the abortionist. He'd been waiting, even praying for years to be able to speak to the abortionist. And he does. He gets a chance. Watch this.
I turned the corner to go home, and there's the abortionist at the end of the block. I've been praying for 20 years for this man, and there he was, and I've been praying for 20 years that I would meet him. So I went up to him, and I said to him, keep his name off the airways, but I said to him, when is this going to stop? When is the baby killing going to stop? And he says, move on. And I said, can't we dialogue? And I had this wonderful dialogue. We talked about women. We talked about healing. We talked about babies. And we talked about Thanksgiving. And at the end of that exchange, I shared the love of Christ with him. I told him we were praying for him. And his heart softened at the end of it. And I said, my name is Mark. And he told me his first name. It was as if he was saying, look, I appreciate the extension of humanity that you've given to me, right? Because we basically depersonalize these people. We make them out to be monsters. When in reality, this man is misguided. He has a misplaced compassion, and he doesn't know what we know. So to approach him as a baby killer, which of course he is, to approach him as, an evil person, he's perpetrating evil, would not be the approach that Christ would take to this man, right? He's loved of God. He's still a child of God. And so I opened a door, hopefully, God willing, Joe, to a future conversation, maybe a meal, whereby we can talk further about Christ and his plan for his life.
Brian, if you could speak to that, to Mark's heart vis-a-vis those on the other side, if you will, and what you've seen of Mark's pro-life sidewalk counseling.
Mark is a unique person. He's dedicated his life. He and his family have turned their life into a sacred offering in order to help people. As our mission is given to us from God to make disciples of them all. Well, Mark has taken that way more seriously than most of us have, and he's totally committed on many scales. But they are truly, truly wonderful, warm, kind, and gentle people. He's been doing, I believe he's been doing the sidewalk counseling for close to 18 years. And Mark's estimate, he wouldn't tell me this, I had to drag it out of him, but he estimates that in the last 2 years, he's prevented 20 babies from being killed in an abortion clinic, and probably more than 100 over the last 18 years. There's one particular story that I think is really compelling, and that one day he had the fortune to be able to counsel a young couple who were going into the abortuary to terminate their child. And he was able to invite them to have a cup of coffee. They met, they decided against the abortion. They then got married. They had a baby. They are an intact family. And they're one of the many families that Mark has helped that actually come to his home for dinner. Mark stays with these people. It's not just talk them out of it and then turn them back into whatever negative environment they came out of. He stays with them and surrounds them with the resources and the people that they need. It's just so unfair, that such good people are being so traumatized right now.
Well, there's something really neat about this. He is a true apostle for life, faith, family, and freedom. And you know what? As you said to me earlier, they went after the wrong guy. They went after the wrong family. Because in this suffering that Mark and his family have to endure, I think the scales are being removed from the public's eyes. This story has already, since LifeSiteNews broke it on Friday, has spread all throughout the mainstream media. And it's very difficult to paint Mark in any way as a perpetrator, as an evil guy, as a whatever. His life is just an open book. Tell me about that, if you will.
Yeah, well, look, I think we have to put this in the context of a bigger picture. We are at war. There's a battle going on between the forces of good and evil. When the human secularists basically took over all of the institutions, they removed God from them. When you remove God from them, you remove truth, beauty, and goodness, and you replace it with lies, profanity, and evil. And what we're beginning to see is the manifestation of that on a regular basis. This has to serve us as a wake-up call. As we talked earlier, we can no longer pretend we don't know what it is that we know. This is a battle that has to be fought with great love, but it has to be fought. I heard one time we have to fight with one hand and pray with the other. But our battle, our weapons are spiritual. This is the battle of powers and principalities, and we as good Catholics can't lose sight of the approach that we have to have. There's a need for God that's hardwired into everybody's heart, no matter where they are in their lives. And we as salespeople, need to sell into that and be an example of Christian joy. And I can guarantee you that the Houcks, even with the duress that they're going, are filled with joy. Joy and suffering coexist; they're not opposites. So I think, and his whole extended family, by the way. I mean, if you ever have an opportunity to meet the extended family, they're just great people who I almost believe that God has chosen them, for this challenge to be an example for other people. So if we keep an eye on Mark and the family, I think we're going to be able to see persona Christi in them.
They have a lot to be proud of. I can only imagine if Mark is in my family. What's the takeaway here that people should go away with now? How can they help the family?
There is a website that's set up, a send. What is it? You probably know it.
Give, Send, Go.
Give, Send, Go. That's set up. The number one thing is that we need prayer. That's not the least you can do. That's the most that you can do. I know our families have benefited from the prayers of thousands when we went through difficult time, John Henry, and that's what we need first and foremost. It's the Thomas More Society has stepped in, so that's going to be a huge help for the family. But if you can go to that website, and anything that you can donate would be helpful. But the big thing is, look, we have to wake up. It's time for us to bring Christ into the public square. He's been eliminated during our watch while we were busy raising our families and running our businesses. This is our time to do battle. Our grandfathers and fathers spent 4 years when they were little fighting a battle to give us this greatest opportunity to live the life that we've had. This is now the battle that we've been raised for. This is our generation's fight. And we have to step up whether we like it or not.
And we have in Mark Houck an awesome, what do you want to call him? General to fall behind. It's amazing that we have someone to hold up who's right in the firing line and to both follow his example, to support him when we can. It's an amazing thing.
And make no mistake about it, this is coming to a neighborhood near you if we don't stand up right now.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us. And we will start to pray right now that your role as spokesman, at least for now, still continues strong.
Great. Thanks, John Henry. Pleasure.
God bless you. And God bless all of you. We'll see you next time. Hi, everyone. This is John Henry Westen. We hope you enjoyed this video. And to see more like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from LifeSiteNews. So check out our links in the description to read more, sign up for our newsletter, and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all of the latest life, family, and culture news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.